Hello, and welcome back to the Revolution of Being podcast. Today, we are talking about a topic that has really been on my heart the last week. Something that is so hot to talk about right now culturally, which is the balance of masculine and feminine energy. And for me, I've noticed really in the last, few months, a flare up of autoimmune symptoms. And I've had to kind of dive deep into why is this happening? What's my body telling me? Where is the imbalance? Because everything starts with energy, right? Everything's energetic and then it manifests in the body. And that really brought me to this understanding in the last week that it's really become once again for me an imbalance in my masculine and feminine energy, meaning I am way too much into the doing right now. My body is not happy about that. And I think for a lot of women who struggle with chronic illness, autoimmune symptoms, chronic pain, fatigue, all of that, what I've noticed with my own clients and in my own journey, and even friends I know who have autoimmune symptoms, is that predominantly we are operating in our masculine energy most of the time. And again, that's that doing energy. That's that, like, I've got to force and push and really kind of work hard. And the feminine is more of that flow. And so we wanted to dive in today on, what do both of those energies embody? What is society telling us about this? Because there's a lot of programming out there, especially for women, feminist rights and all these different things. So we want to talk about the societal messages, but then how we can kind of find our own balance in our own journey, right? Because some people beautifully embody that balance. Others, like you and I, through trauma, really lived in masculine energy for a long time. So for us, having to get to a place of balance is not natural for us. That's out of our comfort zone. So, to kind of dive in, Jess, I know this is something you and I talked about specifically a week ago. I had this kind of epiphany that, like, oh my God, I really think a lot of the symptoms women are having right now is because we are in a kind of male dominated culture with which we've had to really kind of acclimate, keep up with the man. We've got to make sure we're earning equal wages. We've got to also be, in a lot of cases, the breadwinner and the one who's raising the children, but also holding the household together, and all these different things that, 100 years ago were not commonplace. There were very distinct roles for men and women. And I'm not saying that's necessarily better or worse, but it was different because I think women were really a little bit more embodied, because the culture was so different. So, to kind of jump on in, you and I, again, have dealt with this. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, but also kind of just banter
Yeah,
about
it's a
this
good one.
topic.
Okay, so to start off with, we hear a lot of these words like masculine and feminine energy. I think we hear it played out in different contexts as well. There's the patriarchy, there's the feminist movement, there's the roles within our households, within our lives. And so let's just get to the nuts and bolts of like the energy aspect though. And I wanted to read this. So when we think about masculine energy, for those that are listening, just pay attention to like the roles you're playing when I read this. It's usually around doing. So masculine energy is very action oriented. So doing, assertiveness, organizing, these are very task driven aspects. Think of it like your brain and your ego, protecting, logical, and structure. So those are words that are associated with the masculine energy. So again, just kind of think about that and think about the world we live in. I know with the world I live in and working with businesses, these are big words. There's a lot of masculine energy in the corporate business world. Feminine energy is on the opposite. So think like yin and yang. Think of the above and below, the dark and the light kind of a thing. It's sort of like that. There's very subjective pieces to the feminine energy. It's being, it's receiving, it's intuition, it's listening, creativity, open, and vulnerability. And so that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about these two energies. There's not one energy that's better than the other. But what I find really, really interesting, let's just talk about the feminine aspect for a minute, because I believe the world has been very dominated by the masculine energy in all of us, right? As women, we are told to get in the hustle and get in the grind. And there is a spot for that, but that's not what we're supposed to fully embody. And then let's look at like women's health. Let's look at our autoimmune. We tend to have a lot of root chakra, sacral issues. Think like navel and down, a lot of reproductive, things like that. So when we think about that feminine energy, if it's starved, if we're not into our creativity and our intuition, we're going to have a lot of gut and reproductive issues. Very classic of, I would say, most women I know. They're like, I have PCOS, I have endometriosis, I have this, I have that. But then you look at the world they're living in and they're in this hyper masculine hustle grind, having to do everything by themselves, having to protect everything. Now let's switch gears and let's go over to the male side. So men also suffer from a deficiency in the balance. And so men think of like heart disease and things like that. We are talking about like that heart chakra, that higher level thing. And we're getting men that have all these kind of like upper area symptoms. And I do think there's just this balance that we're missing. And men are taught that they have to be all the masculine. They got to be the big tough man. You know, they play that role all the time. And therefore they lose touch with the grief and the feelings and the love and the peace that they deserve to feel as well. Their intuition, which is also such an important part of the human experience. So what we're really talking about is, how do we bring balance to the human body through combining the use of what we've been given in our ego and our brain? Like, it's there for a reason, but that is our masculine energy. How do we balance that and make sure we're in balance with our intuition and our being and our essence and our soul, because that's the feminine. And so beyond the autoimmune flare up, which is such a huge part, the part you and I were really reflecting on were the roles. And I'm just going to intro it. I'm I'm an unattached woman, and so in my life I am all of it. I am the doer, I am the nurturer, and trying to be both is very, very hard because I have to live in a lot of masculine energy, right? I have to self-sustain, but that means that I have to come in and I have to self-nurture and I have to do these things. I've always, not always, I've said in the recent years that any kind of partnership for me, the deal has to be that I am allowed to be in my feminine energy, which means I would have to have a partner that embraces his masculine energy, so we can each go back and forth in between that, because it's very hard for him to be in his masculine if I'm holding all the masculinity, as it would be for me to be in the feminine if he's being in the feminine. So we have to have those roles, and that's where we're more evenly yoked. And so in that realm, I know you have a lot of thoughts about this. I would love to hear more about it, but I wanted to set the stage, and then we'll just get into kind of how we flipped everything over on its back a bit.
Yeah, and thank you. That's such a beautiful kind of summary, outline of what we're going to be jumping into. And to your point, we really, starting, gosh, I don't even know, historically, 60s, 70s, when women started demanding all this autonomy and all these rights, which is amazing. Women deserve to have a say. Women deserve to have a voice. Women deserve the opportunity to work if they choose to, right? And part of me wonders, and this is a little tinfoil hatty, but I'm like, is this some kind of conspiracy to take away women's inherent feminine by, dangling this carrot of, you can be the dominant woman in the workplace, go slay, queen, and all these things that really push us into masculine, which is not the energy we're supposed to fully embody. There is a balance, right? If we could cut it into a pie chart, I would say women predominantly should be 60-40, 60% feminine, 40 masculine. And of course that changes different times of your life, your journey, depending on where you're at. But likewise, men, predominantly should be in their masculine, but then have that feminine essence as well. And, I really think from, at least for me growing up, my mother was a single mom. My parents were separated when I was quite young, and she was the one who had to embody a lot of that masculine energy to do things, right? And a lot of her own struggles were her own making. I'll just say that, right? Like we all have a choice in our challenges. However, she did step up and became that person who had to really kind of hold space for both roles. And so from an early age, I saw hustle. Like that's all I saw was hustle and working 2 to 3 jobs to sustain. And, the only time she would be sleeping would be at 10 o'clock at night when she finally passed out for the day in front of the news, and then she's back up early in the morning doing it again. And so that was what was ingrained in me, was to just get by, not even have a good life, but to just get by. This is how hard you have to work. And so I thought when I went to college, that I was going to be kind of paving a different way for myself. Now, yeah, stepping into nursing, I had a better career out the gate than my parents ever had. And I started making, decent money and in my early to mid 20s. However, I still embodied that hustle and I never felt safe around being. I never felt safe to rest. I never felt safe that I had enough, whether it was money, resources, time. Um, in my free time, I would run, I would do hit workouts, I would do all these things that kept me in very masculine energy. And what I started to understand, and I think we talked about this before, but on a cellular level, my body was addicted to the cortisol because that's all I knew growing up was root chakra, safety, fear, all these deep emotions. And so, fast forward into my 20s and then 30s when I'm still addicted to those same adrenaline hormones. um, it's not faring well for me. And it did catch up to me. My mid 20s or mid 30s was when I started to have autoimmune symptoms. And it was like all the stuff, kind of came crashing down where I had to finally stop and look at my life. And I didn't understand what was happening, right? Like I was newly into my spiritual awakening journey. People were telling me quit gluten, quit dairy, quit all these things, but no one was ever telling me to like look in and actually address things on a deeper level until I started reading some books about this. And so, what I found even in my relationships too was, my husband and I were high school sweethearts. And he was the first person I felt very cared by when I was younger. We were 17, 18 years old. And he was so nurturing, and is still like that. Is his energy is very, he's very into his feminine. Like he is very just a caring, amazing soul. And then we broke up and life happened and reconnected in our mid 20s, and things got complicated fast. In that time he had 2 kids, and I was thrown back into that masculine role of the breadwinner. My husband was a substitute teacher making $100 or less a day, a couple days a week. And I was the one basically having to foot all the bills. Shouldn't say having, chose to, but as a part of the relationship to sustain, I was the one who took on the masculine again. So once again, I'm heavily in my masculine. And that has been my life for, my entire adult life until the last couple of years, really. And the flip for me was, having tremendous burnout in 2020 as a nurse frontline, spiritual awakening happening, and my body just giving out. Basically I hit a point where it's like, if I continue down this road, I'm going to be dead in a couple of years. I'm going to either have cancer or mental health is going to decline so badly that I can't be here. And so I made the choice to step back. And in spite of the tremendous fear around money, because mind you, I was still the breadwinner at that point in 2020, 2021, he was still in education. And, it's not like we had all this money. And I think some people think, when you're a business owner or when you do these things, you must have, all these resources. No, fuck no. Like we didn't. And in fact, it was a leap of faith. And I had to move through astounding amounts of fear to trust that it was going to be okay. And, we lived very skinny for a few years and we still are, I would say, frugal. We prioritize investing versus commercialized, purchasing of things. So, we really lived very, very skinny for a while so that we could afford for me to pursue starting a business and then getting that off the ground. And as you know, as a business owner, it's not linear. You don't just hit success. I've had out the gate, I had great success. And then life happens. People aren't investing like they were. The economy is different. There's all these things that the income's not stable. And so I've had to work through all these limiting beliefs around my income and detach it from what it means about me, right? Because my intuition, my rather instinct, not intuition, my instinct, that ego instinct is to grind. Okay, I'm not making enough. I got to grind, grind, grind. What else can I do? right? That is the worst thing I have done throughout my time as a business owner. And I say that because in the times I feel that frantic energy, what I've learned is that's the time I need to stop and be, which is so counter to everything we're told, especially the hustle culture. Now, I'm not saying having a consistent practice of putting in hours, into your business every day or every week isn't valuable. It 100% is. But when you feel like you're stuck in tire spinning, that is the time to drop into meditation, let off the gas, because that's when you also get that inspiration to do something different, or an opportunity falls in your lap that you would have otherwise missed if you were, hitting the pavement running. And so it's still a lot of unconditioning, and a trial and error. Like every time I hit the wall, the universe is like, "Are you going to learn yet?" And I'm like, "But this time is different. Like I know I can figure this out." And they're like, "But we're here to help you. Why aren't you letting us help?" Because I know what I'm doing. Let me figure this out. And it's just that independent, energy that I think as a society, a lot of us embody. Like that is the American culture. We are very independent people, which is a problem because we are meant to be communal. We're not meant to do this alone. We're meant to be in tribes. We're meant to have our sisters and our brothers and our, families and friends and whomever else are a part of that support you. And, I wouldn't be where I am in business if I didn't have the people I've met along the way to support me. Bottom line, people that understand the struggle that we have, because it is the biggest mind F I've ever been through is becoming a business owner. It's the ultimate course in personal development. Every single insecurity you have is shown to you, but it also further highlighted how much I lived in the masculine for so long, and that this will be a continual, I'm not going to say struggle or challenge, but it's going to be something I'm going to have to continue to reevaluate as I go, because my tendency is always to go back into the grind. That is my default. That is the pattern that's so deeply ingrained in my brain. And the new patterns, the new brain connections are like, hey, it doesn't have to be so hard. And in fact, Ange, you've had your best months when you're working less. It's easier for you. You're in that flow, you're in the feminine. And, to kind of bring it back to the masculine feminine, there are times, you have to begin to discern for yourself when the time is the go time and when the time is the flow time. And, for me, whenever I'm struggling, whenever I'm tire spinning, that is, I gotta step into flow because I'm overdoing it. And the manifestation culture really, kind of poisons the brain with just manifest it, just envision the best outcome, just be the identity of. Well, no, you have to take aligned action too. And I know plenty of people who have said, I just want to manifest living on a boat and not doing anything. It's like, well, we're not here as people to just go off grid and not actually contribute to society. So that's a bunch of BS. But you're never going to manifest anything if you don't also have aligned action. But you don't get the aligned action until you shut the hell up and actually calm your mind to receive it. And I say that jokingly because I am that knucklehead who continues to bypass the messages because I'm kind of in that frantic energy at times. And, that was a conversation my husband and I had this weekend, and it was really vulnerable. Like, I'm so used to being that strong person. Like, I don't, like in our relationship, I don't let my emotions show very often. There's a lot of reasons for that we won't get into, but there was a lot of trauma that came as a part of my relationship. And, things over the years that have been really hard to work through. And so for me to be vulnerable in that space has been hard. And this weekend, I just, in tears said, I just want to be taken care of. Like, I don't want to work so hard. I want a partner who just lets me feel like I'm taken care of. And that was hard to say. Like, I'm gonna tear up as I'm saying that because it's super vulnerable, right? Because we're taught and cultured into, you've got to be that person because what if you end up single? What if you and your partner break up? What if he dies? You have to be able to take care of yourself. Like, what a fucking toxic thing to tell a woman to plan for the worst instead of embody the beauty of those relationships, but also say like, yeah, babe, like I want to feel taken care of. Like I don't want to have to always be the one to bring in all the money. And those roles have changed. He stepped into a different position in his within the department he was in and is now working in a totally different field, which has been a blessing. It's kind of let some of the energy and intensity on me let up a little bit, but I still have that default programming that I've got to be the one to do all the things. And so delegating, and kind of taking my feet off the gas has been really hard. And, you know, having my, I shouldn't say mine, I'm not going to claim them as mine, but having autoimmune symptoms for the last few months really showed me how much I've been living back in the masculine again, kind of unintentionally. I didn't, I also got sick with pneumonia. I think there were a few other factors that contributed to that. But, I definitely had pneumonia in January as a way for the universe to be like, you need to effing stop. Like, I'm gonna slap you hard. And I pride myself on hardly ever getting sick. Like I'm moderately quite healthy, I'd say. And that was very humbling. And I just laughed. I could do nothing except lay on the couch, feel like I'm dying, and be like, well, there's a reason I got knocked down. And I'm gonna just take it. And I couldn't even like meditate because I felt so lousy. Like I literally just was watching trash TV and trying to sleep. That's all I could do. Um, but it was after that experience in January where I had a lot of breakthroughs. Even though I wasn't like being super intentional with meditation and all that, I had a lot of breakthroughs from simply just
Yeah.
stopping. And sometimes the universe does that to you, whether it's a cancer or an autoimmune illness or a really gnarly sickness, those are never punishments, but rather opportunities to stop, slow down, and reflect. Like, where is the imbalance here? What am I meant to learn from this? Right? I always ask, and you're excellent at that too. Whenever we get sidelined by really difficult things, it's like, all right, what's the learning here? What's the lesson? Like, what am I meant to understand? Because there's always something there, and that also pulls you out of victimhood. Like, life isn't happening to you. This is all happening for you. Autoimmune wasn't happening to me. It was happening for me to slow down and rebalance, because if I don't, there's a lot worse outcome that could happen if I continue down the trajectory
Yeah.
I was
At the
going.
end of the day, the hard part about this whole conversation for a lot of people is there's no quick fix. There's not a supplement for a deficiency in your feminine energy. There's not a supplement for a deficiency in your masculine energy. It's going to always require you to go into the source and do the work. I was thinking about that as you were speaking. I think for me, for a number of years, I've heard about that masculine, feminine energy, and I got it, but it was kind of confusing. But I was thinking about it from a biological perspective, and I think I voiced this to you the other day. There is a biological component to it. We talked about, if we're not grounded in our creativity and our intuition and all these things, we do suffer the consequences in our physical body. But women are designed to bear children. And so we are very different than men, where, I've had children, you've had children, our bodies change, and we are in this cocooning stage of, we're incubating and we're growing this child, and, we're not going to run fast. We're not gonna be able to fight off a grizzly bear. I mean, these are big examples, but we're much more vulnerable. Our hormones are in a preservation mode. We're sustaining a life. And so when we think about that, we are designed to be protected. And that's why men gain muscle, not fat, right? They are meant to run fast. They're meant to be strong physically. They have more of a masculine energy to them because they play that role in sustaining and creating life as well. That's why we attract to that. But the problem is society has warped all this. It has warped it beyond belief, and it's done it in really weird ways. And it's changed the dynamics, and we see women that, and I've done MMA. Like I've done this stuff. It's fun. I love adrenaline. I am very in tune with the masculine side of me, but it's hyper focused on it. Like that is the epitome of whatever, of being a woman, or this means you're a man, or we have the male feminist, which confuses me. And I don't mean to offend anybody. I get it all. Everybody is doing their best to try to decipher this, but at the end of the day, there's a biological response to it. And there's no real way to counteract that other than to get in touch with the whole part of yourself. And you might be a man that has more feminine energy. That's okay. You might be a woman who has more masculine energy. I work with people on a neurological level. I see it all the time. I see women who have a lot of more of the masculine, task oriented, action oriented wiring attributes. oftentimes they end up entrepreneurs. They are subject to the burnout though. And they often feel a little bit insecure about the fact that they're kind of direct, they're straightforward, they move fast, they're decisive. And society will be like, no, 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 no. Now you're a bitch. They get fed that idea and they start to really like, oh, I am like, I can't be like that. But if you're a man like that, you're applauded. So this happens in all these weird little ways. And so when I'm coming in, I talk about the masculine, feminine, and some men have more subjective social pieces to them and they're a little bit more feminine in their energy. And they've had issues with that too, being told that they're not manly enough or soft or whatever it is. This is the beautiful part about being a human. And what I love doing is being able to come in and say, listen, like, I know your profile, Angie. I know your profile, and you embody both masculine and feminine energy in your neurological wiring. And you do get locked into more of that task oriented go part, the analyzing part, the part that wants to break it down. But there's this beautiful softness to you. And you have that like in your patience. It's maternal. It wants to be helpful. It's great for like counseling. And I mean, that's a beautiful feminine aspect. I have a family member and I don't even have that. I don't have that aspect, but I have like high empathy and other attributes. And it's really learning like, what are you not embracing about yourself? And that's tough when we're in relationships. I think we we feel we have to survive. So we're in kind of a survival mode. And in your case, I have to hustle to pay the bills, right? Nobody else is doing it. I got to step in and do it. That's a rock and a hard place. And a lot of us exist there. But it's not always what it seems. So it's being able to do that. Yes, you got to do what you got to do. But being present is probably the best way to fall into your feminine or masculine energy. It's like, am I getting chased by the grizzly bear right now? Is it right now? Because if it's not right now, what can I do right now to drop in to whatever I need to? And in our case, it's feminine energy. Like, what can I do right now to drop into safety, protection, rest, intuition, discernment, whatever it is? What can I do in this moment? Because in the next moment, I might be back to running from the grizzly bear. And this is the work. And I feel like it gets harder the more enlightened you get. I don't even love the word enlightened, but the more online you become to yourself, this work gets substantially harder because we feel the nuances much more quickly, much more deeply. So we can feel when the conversation is off. We can feel when the relationship isn't in balance and isn't aligned. And that's what we're supposed to feel because we're supposed to be constantly calibrating to what is for us. That's manifestation, is paying attention to the calibration and being able to move with that and trust in that. And that is the work. And that's why these relationships get so much harder. That's why being in a marriage and having to grow together, like literally grow together, we usually just like do something like this. And we end up on these different planes. And then it's like, can we find each other again? And can we learn this lesson now? And this might be like the lesson of you and your husband in this moment of like, okay, what does it mean to be in your masculine? What does it mean to be in your feminine? And how do I support you here and you support me here? It is so important. And I don't think it's talked about enough. I think, you and I talk about the physical symptoms a lot, the autoimmune stuff. What is it like? 90% of our population has autoimmune. We're all just out of alignment. We talk about that a lot. And I had this conversation with a friend yesterday. It's like chasing this symptom, chasing that symptom, taking this supplement, doing this thing. Fine. Fine. But biohacking is not going to solve the inner problems. Like you said, you made a post about that recently, like biohacking. It's not all of it. The other half of it is there's no supplement for your masculine or feminine energy. There's no supplement for the inner work. So do them both.
well, you can't biohack a crap diet that you're just struggling through because you don't have or take the time to eat nutritious foods. You can't biohack, you know, large amounts of stress because you're in a strained relationship, and that was something that, I had texted a few girlfriends who also have autoimmune, who are mirrors of me. I mean, they're in similar situations with, it's just interesting. And I had said, this is the epiphany I had about those of us who are going through autoimmune, is that we are so far in our masculine. And they were like, holy shit, like, yeah, I've never thought about that. Now, they're not people that necessarily are super into like this kind of conversation. They're open to it, but it was like, this isn't how we're meant to be. And to your point, women's hormones are so different than men. And you can take all the supplements in the world to demasculate yourself to be more feminine, but at the end of the day, if you're a man, your hormone structure is very different. And similar to females, we can do testosterone and other stuff. We're never going to be a biological man. Like, our wiring is very different. And and I say that because, we have 28-day cycles, and our hormones are very, very, very testy, different times of the cycle. I didn't know this until probably a year or two ago. I shouldn't be doing hard workouts the week before my period. No idea. No one ever told me that. Certainly didn't know that in nursing school. They don't talk about how sensitive we are to heightened stress during that premenstrual phase. And right after is the time, you could do a little bit more intense workouts and, consider like a short fast. Like, I had no idea all these things. Whereas men, they kind of have daily hormone cycles. So they're a lot less subject to stress because their body resets a lot faster. And, what you had said in our conversation a few days ago that really just struck a chord was, women are designed to be kept safe. We need that. We are the ones who are birthing the babies, who are nursing the babies, who are caring and tending. And it's not always just about babies, but our structure is not and will never be the same as a man. My muscular, mass will never be what my husband's is. There was a time where I kicked his ass in running, and I was very proud of that. However, like, he's been training and there's no way I can keep up with him at this point. He also has a crap ton more muscle. He's going to lift a lot more weights than I can lift. And that's what a beautiful thing. I have a partner who in a difficult situation can certainly save me. He can pick up my body if needed and get us out of a fire. I couldn't do that for him. 200 something pounds of a human. There's no way in hell I could do that. And I'm not meant to. Women are designed differently for a reason. And that is where, this whole idea of competition, men and women, there's none, because women have unique gifts that men will never have. Men have unique gifts that women are not designed to have. And that's a beautiful thing to be celebrated, not to compare or say one is better than the other. They're, like you said, yin and yang, like they're meant to coexist and flow and ebb together. And so it's just, finding your own balance and recognizing, again, some of the signs that you're imbalanced: burnout, high cortisol, not sleeping well, craving a lot of sugar or junk food, is a sign you're out of balance. Anxiety and racing minds are signs that you're out of balance. So there's a lot of different things. Even women holding on to weight. I'm launching a group coaching program around weight. And for a lot of women, what I've noticed too is protection. Women will hold on to weight for protection because they don't feel safe. So again, it goes back to root chakra, safety, really being able to be in a space where, if you're in a relationship and your partner doesn't make you feel safe, please get out. Like, figure out how you can make that work. You can, anything is possible. But if you're not in an environment where you feel safe, you have to figure out, a way, tap into resources, your friends, things like that, to help you be safe. And that could be, not even physical safety, right? I'm not talking just physical abuse, but a partner who doesn't emotionally support you, or who, takes for granted everything you're doing, and you're just wearing all the hats and they're just there for the ride. Like, you don't feel safe and you can't be in your feminine in that kind of relationship. And that can go with friendships too. If you're in a relationship with someone who's taking from you as a friend, that's a toxic relationship and is also going to wear on your life energy. So you kind of have to do an inventory and say, like, where are these energetic leaks happening, and how can I, like, plug that hole, get out of that situation, and have better boundaries, and that's something that I've had to do as well. And my husband, I would say, has never intentionally taken advantage of me at all. But there were imbalances because I just commanded doing all the things because I felt like I needed that control. And so I had to like let off the gas and be like, nope, I need you to call on this. I need you to take care of that. I need you to do this and kind of delegate some of the stuff that I couldn't continue to
Yeah.
keep up with. And if you have a partner who's not willing to do that, again, you got to reevaluate your relationships. So to restore balance, that's a big thing. Evaluate your relationships, the things that are sucking your energy. You also said, dropping into the now. That's a really powerful way to tap into that feminine energy. For me, it's being in nature, going for a walk, just earthing, my feet on the ground. It's finally getting a little nicer here in the Midwest. And, we can be outside. I will fully be taking off my socks today. It's going to be in the 60s here. I will fully be grounding in nature today. Um, and just even little breaks, like just little breaks where you can just kind of have some solitude to meditate, to take a bubble bath. If you have the resources to get a massage or something that's just kind of a little TLC, it doesn't have to be expensive, extravagant things, but just those little elements, or even just snuggling up to a good book, it's just slowing down. And again, we're so accustomed to grind, 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 and overcommitting ourselves. And the number of parents I know who have their kids in all these different sports that don't have a day off, you've got to take care of yourself. You have to. And what kind of example are you setting for your own children if you can't even be and
Yeah.
be still? And have them
Yeah.
bored, right? Like you don't have to have your face in a tablet. You don't have to have your face in a phone or the TV screen blaring. You can just be and let that creative energy flow. That's also showing, you and I have boys. It's showing our boys how to be in some of their feminine energy.
Yeah. It's going to be, some people are going to hear this, and I want to throw like a word of caution out there. This is not your excuse. This is nobody's excuse to siphon anything from anybody. I feel like maybe I am just personally a little hypersensitive to that, but I think there are people out there that will use it as an excuse and say, well, I'm not getting enough of my feminine energy. So you need to, you need to, you need to, you need to. And they become the victim of that story. I want to reiterate this is your responsibility just as much as it's my responsibility. And, in my situation, I don't have a partner to do that. I have to learn myself. How do I do that for myself? The difference is when and if I do have a partner, those are going to be strong things that I'm going to look for. Is are you somebody that's going to allow me to be in alignment with myself? And that's in that feminine energy. Am I going to be feeling safe enough to settle into who I am, to be creative, to be soft, to be intuitive, to, trust that you have my back? And I think that's what a lot of women do miss, but that's what I'd be looking for. But in the meantime, I have to do that for myself to even attract that. I have to be able to say, I'm going to rest now. I'm going to let myself rest. I'm not going to gaslight myself. I'm not going to bully myself. I'm not going to demand anything of myself. I'm going to stay right here. And when the time is right, I'm going to move back into that masculine energy and I'm going to get my stuff done. And I'm going to be, protective of my boundaries and advocate for myself and do the things I need to do. I really believe that's where the answer lives is your ability, whether you're in a relationship or you're not. It's can I identify within myself where I'm imbalanced and what do I do? What decisions do I make
Yeah.
today? What do I need to learn about? What do I need to focus on or study? Or do I just need to take a nap and meditate? What do I need? So the responsibility is yours. You are responsible.
I will add to find yourself a
Mhm.
good friend who can be that person to give you permission to. I needed that. You've been that person for me where it's like, Ange, hey, maybe you just need to like take a break right now. Find someone that can hold you accountable or someone that can just be that person to give you permission. Because initially, when we're unconditioning, being a chronic doer, an overdoer all the time, it's really hard to give ourselves that permission because all those thoughts come flying in. You're lazy, you're not working hard enough.
Mhm.
All these like, what if you don't make this month's mortgage? Like blah blah blah. All these fear-based thoughts come in and identity-based thoughts. And I needed a person to just give me that permission and say, "Hey, I see you. You're struggling. Just take a break today. It's okay. It's okay. It's just today." And then it was like, "Oh, thank God." It was like this weight off my shoulders of like, "Okay, cool. Like nothing's going to go haywire. Nobody's going to die." And I legit will like now my phrases, and this is extreme, but it works well for me. Is anybody going to die if I don't do
Mhm.
this right now? Never. No, like there's nothing that I'm not doing that will result in someone dying, ever. Even if I like miss dinner for my kids, they'll survive on snacks. Like it'll be fine. So that's also something where it's like, is this life or death? No. Okay. It'll be fine. It'll be fine if I put that Facebook post up tomorrow for my business. It'll be fine if I wait to do social media for a week or, pay that bill tomorrow instead of today. It's
Mhm.
fine. It's fine. So you can just feel your energy shift when you give yourself that. So find somebody that can hold you accountable too. If you can't do that yourself, find somebody you're just like, hey, I'm working on this. I really need accountability right now. When you see me trip into overdoing or you see me going into that frantic
Mhm.
energy, please respectfully, lovingly call me out. I am here for it. I will hear it and I will
Yeah.
receive it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
We all need good friends. So we are lucky to have one another. Well, I like this topic. Again, I'd like to touch on it more in the future because I think there's a lot of other points that could be made about it. And I think it's the energy of the world. I think we're in this battle between these ideas and concepts. And, hopefully it brings peace to a listener and they start to make changes that help shift the world. Yeah.
yes. Well, thanks again for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you
See you
next
next time.
time.
Bye.
Bye.